Hello, my name is Dustin Nelson and I'm the creator of Rig Modular. In this tutorial I'm going to be going through how to set up your proxy rig. So a proxy rig is what fits your character, and then once you're happy with how that fits and you've got all the pieces in place, then you generate the rig usually from this tab here. So I'm going to start going through all this and just explain what all of this does. To begin, the user can either begin with a template. So there's a few here to choose from, or they can build up their own from scratch by creating a new proxy rig and then adding pieces on. So I will be going through each one of these, and if you have specific questions you can jump to the specific part of the tutorial by clicking any of these buttons if you have the UI up. Alright, so here we go with the create new proxy rig. So I'm going to create this, and this only gives us three proxies. So we have the main proxy, so you can use this to scale up to generally fit the size of your character. We also have the root. So the root here is where you position to fit, like where the center of your character's hips would be, or depending on the type of character it is, you may want to put this somewhere else. In addition to this, there's also a cog control. So by default it's templated because it kind of clutters things up, so I'm going to untemplate this. And you can position this anywhere you'd like. So this cog is the center of gravity. So let's say you were doing a quadruped and his hips were in the back, and you wanted to have a center of gravity that would be more over here. Then once you generate the final rig, you can activate the cog and rotate from that position. The other setting here is on the root itself. There's the option to choose if you want the twist axis to be the y-axis or the x-axis. So by default it's set to Y, but some people may prefer X so that it can be more consistent with the rest of the modules. So most modules, the X-axis will be the twist axis. So it just depends on your production, what your animators prefer, all those types of things. Alright, so that's the proxy rig. I'm going to create a new scene here and just quickly go through a template. So there's biped, quadruped, arachnid, and bird. I'll start with just a biped and I'll create. So this here is started from the root, and then from there it was built up using all of the different modules here in step 1.2. There's splines, which represent the spine and the neck. There are arms, obviously the arms here. There are legs here for the legs. So the legs also include the toes and the ball and the ankle of the foot. And then FK chains are what are used for the fingers and the thumbs. If you wanted to have toes, you could add those there. And for the head, there's the head, which is basically just not much here, just an end joint and a jaw and a jaw end. And then attached to the jaw end, or the head end, sorry, is the look-ats. So the look-ats are for eyes typically, gives you the option to aim those wherever you see you'd fit these, again, to your character. And the last is auxiliaries, so I'll be going to this in more detail. But you can start with any of these presets if you'd like. Alright, so the first option we're going to go through for the modules is the spline. So this is used for things like spine and neck and anywhere where you want some curvature but an attach point at the end. So I'm going to give it a name first. I will call this spine. Then I can set the number of joints I want, so this can be anywhere between 1 in the middle, between the top and the attach, all the way up to 100. So I'm going to go with, let's say 5. The next option is the twist. So we have the x-axis and the y-axis. Typically animators prefer the y-axis because that would be typical of most productions, I think, but you also have the x-axis for if there's certain reasoning why you might want this. X-axis is kind of the twist axis used for every other module, which is a good reason why you may want to use this one. But you do have the choice, and again you have the choice as well in the root control. So generally you would want the same one for your root as you set for in here. The next option is to mirror. So most proxies have the option to mirror. I'm going to leave this off, and then I select what I want to build it off of and I hit create. Alright, So I can create as many splines as I want off of here, as long as the node has a sphere like this that sort of represents where a joint will be, then that is what you want to move around, and that's what you can attach to. At the very bottom of each one you have its parent. So the parent is the top of the hierarchy, and you can go in and affect the whole module. And you can go in and now position this to fit your character, the auto space, and then you can go in and move these around to fit your character. Alright, so let's say you have this now and you want to make any changes. You can always go to the edit module, and then in here you either type the name in manually, or you can select any one of the proxies and hit load. And then you can adjust the number of joints and the twist axis. So let's say I want to put it back to the default, which is 4. If I apply, it'll put them back, and it maintains the same position and rotation for the proxies as before you had it. So if you put it at like 100, or let's just do say 12, and I apply, you can see those original ones change and the new ones don't have any values to go with. So let's undo that. And once I'm happy with this, I can go to the generate rig, and this is all I wanted in my rig. So I'm going to go ahead and generate this, and then we'll look at the options. So I'm going to call this my character, and I'll generate the modular rig. So this is more or less what you get. We have the root control, which comes with everything, and we have the root secondary, and by default the spline does not move with the root secondary control. So this is so you can move the hips and have the top half stay where it is. But you can go into the top IK control and adjust that, the root parent, to be the root secondary, and now it would go with that one. I'll just put that back to the default. Okay, and now to go through some of the settings. So the top IK control has most of the settings that you'll use. It's sort of like a hybrid IK and FK. So I have these FK controls, which I can go in. I can rotate these, which affects the whole object, whole part. I can move them around. And I'll just put these back. And I'll rotate it back a little bit more. Alright, so one thing that happens, and you can see that these kind of curve out a little bit. So there's a couple ways you can tweak that. Again, this depends on what you're setting, because if you wanted to add an animate with this one, you want to have the mid IK control move with that, and you can see how that affects the joints. However, if you don't want that, you can go in here and turn down the influence of the IK. By turning that off, then it will follow more with the FK and auto rotate. So if I go in and rotate all these, it follows a little bit better. And you can still go in and move all these, and you can grab the middle one, which will kind of affect everything. So that's one of the options. There's also the mid-orient and mid-translate, so if you want it to be locked in place so it doesn't get affected by anything, you can turn that off, and now it's always going to be locked in that position for the middle. Each one of the FK controls has its own orient, so whether it takes on influence from the parent. So if I go into, say, this one here, and I turn off the orient, whatever these ones do won't affect the orientation. It'll still move it, but it won't rotate with it. So it gives you a lot of control that way. Alright, in the top one we have the same sort of thing, so you can choose whether this moves with the bottom one. So if you wanted to have like the bottom moving around and using your your FK controls to actually affect the joints, you can still have the top stay locked in position. Like if the character was swinging from something or stretching, you have that option. The other option is the follow FK control. So what this does is it forces the joints, no matter where they go, to move with the FK control. So if I put this to 1, what this will give you is like no matter what you do, they will be locked, and you won't get any stretching in these joints either if you follow the FK purely. So it gives you a much more FK style. And then we also have the curvature, so you can adjust this. This is subtle, but it can make a bit of difference. So if I have things pulled out a bit more, you can adjust how much curvature is going to happen. So you can see they round out even more. Again, depending on how the animator is using it, they'll find what works best for them. And if that's still not enough control, there's also the spine micro control. So by default they're hidden because it just clutters things up a lot, but if I turn this on, there's all these controls here. And they follow the controls, like the FK and the IK controls. So if I move these around, you can see that those ones with the two circles at each end move and follow. And then you can go in and move these to have individual precision on each joint. Alright, so now I'm going to go through the arms. So same thing as before, we start with giving it a name, so I'm just going to call this arm. And then we have the options for roll joints, so if we want to have like a little more control in the twisting and for better deformation with like maintaining volume and that sort of thing, we have the option to create roll joints. And I'm going to use some roll joints, so I'm just going to use 4 and 4. The next option we have is the elbows. So we have 1 elbow or 2 elbows. This is sort of like if you want to create like a dog leg or dog, well, not really an arm, but you do have the option. In the legs, I'll go through this one, but for the FK, we'll just do 1 elbow. And then the next option is tune arms. So this requires at least 1 roll joint. And what this does is it gives you even more control over the deformation. So I'm going to leave it on for this one, and for the legs, I'll do it the other way. The next option is to create whether we want a pair of arms or a left arm or a right arm, and this just, if you want one side or the other or a pair. So I'm going to choose a pair, so this will be the same as mirror module for a lot of them. And then I choose which joint I want to attach it to. And anytime you get this prism sort of one, this is an end of a module. So I could attach to any one of these. Chances are for the spine, it should attach off the last spine, and then from there you could build a neck and go from there. So I'm going to go with the arm on the spine top. And I've named it arm, and I'll go create. Okay. So now we have the arm, and we can position this where we'd like. I could go in and scale up the arm if I wanted to. And so we have a clavicle, a shoulder, elbow, and a wrist. So I can go in and fit this to my character, however that would need to be. And then I'm just going to mirror this to the other side, so maybe I'll bring the arm down a little bit so he's in some sort of an A pose. Okay, and I'm just going to go in the mirroring option, I'm going to say all left to right, and that will put the other side. Alright, same with the spine. We can go into the edit modules and we can edit the arms. So I can choose any one of these proxies and I can load them. And then I can adjust, like if I want to have no roll joints, I can hit apply and that will remove them, but I'll bring those back. And then I can also modify whether it'll be tune arms or not. So if you're not sure what it is, you can select on the parent and it will tell you in here if it's tune arms or not. Alright, so that's pretty much it, and I'm going to leave tune arms on. That should be good. Alright, so let's generate this rig, and I'll use the same name as before, and we'll go generate. Alright, and I'm not going to generate the single hierarchy joints. Okay, so now we have a character with a spine, which we went over earlier, and now we have the arms. So to begin with, by default, it's in FK. A clavicle control, we have a shoulder control, elbow, and the wrist. So in here we can look at some of these options. So we'll start at the clavicle and work our way down. So there's not much to the clavicle, does whatever the parent does. So if I rotate the body, clavicle goes with. But you'll notice that if I rotate the clavicle, the shoulder does not move or does not rotate with it by default. So we can just go in here and turn on the clavicle influence. By setting this to 1, now if I move this, the arm will come up. But if you wanted to have like a shoulder shrug, I can go in and turn off the clavicle influence or have it somewhere in between. And now wherever I rotate the clavicle, it moves the shoulder, but the shoulder keeps the direction that it's pointing. The next step we have is the shoulder orient. So if I turn this down, no matter what I do, the shoulder is not going to orient to anything. If I turn this on, the shoulder will orient to the parent of the proxy. So that's how the shoulder orient works. You can see the difference here. Follows the spine top because that was the parent of this module, and otherwise not. And then I can also go in and scale, so this will actually scale the controls. And next up is the elbow control. There's really not much here, just to rotate. And so people are often confused why this only rotates on one axis. Well, this is how an actual elbow rotates. It's a hinge joint. So if you want to have the hand kind of go upwards, that's twisting from the shoulder. So that's how you would do something like that. And the reason for this is because if you're using IK and FK matching, you need to have this only bending on the one axis. So it's the only way that would work with the IK. And the wrist, there's not much to it, but next to the wrist is the switch control. So this is how you switch between IK and FK, and then it has a bunch of other settings. So I have in here, I can switch between IK and FK. So I'll do that. So now I'm in IK mode. So I have just this one control for the wrist and one for the elbow. And you'll notice that the FK shoulder control is still here. The reason for that is because you can actually move that around if you wanted to. And that would actually, affect how the arm was trying to reach. So if you needed to have that kind of control, like let's say it was popping a bit, you could, modify it, like just move this a little bit just to get rid of the popping that might be occurring with IK. And what else do we got here? So we have the auto volume. So as the arm stretches, if you were to have stretching enabled, so let's go ahead and enable stretch. Alright, so now the arm will stretch to reach. And then we also have elbow lock, so that will lock the elbow to the elbow control. So if you ever needed to have a character like resting his elbow on a wall or on a table or something, you could kind of keep that in place and then animate this moving around that position somewhat. And then we also have the arm scale. So if you wanted, you could actually overshoot the scale or have it squished down. So by default, like with just a stretch on, as the arm gets closer, it starts to bend. Now, if you didn't want to have that effect all the time, you could just animate the scale of the arm, and that way it can collapse inward or push way out. All right, the next thing we have is the parent influence. So with this on, the wrist will go wherever the parent module will go. So it's sort of like a hybrid IK, FK sort of thing. Still works in IK, but it moves with. And you can animate this. So if you wanted to have like an IK walk cycle or something, you could do that. And then you can also have it follow wherever the root goes. Oops, there we go. So it stays like relative to the root. So that's another option. And then you could choose the root type. So if you wanted to have to go with the secondary, you could do that too. And now it goes with the secondary. So a lot of different options, a lot of versatility. There's a lot going on, so it could take you a little while to get a handle for it, but that's what these tutorials are for. The other one we have is, I'll turn that off, is in here in the elbow, you can choose between main, wrist, shoulder, wrist, and shoulder. So as I move this around, you can see it just kind of, it'll only go wherever the main control goes. But I can go in here and change this, so if I want it to follow the wrist, so wherever the wrist goes, it's going to follow the wrist. And then I can also set it to the shoulder. So if this moved around, it would stay with the shoulder, and then you don't have to worry about animating these things coming forward and back all the time. And then the next option is shoulder and wrist, well, wrist and shoulder. So now it stays kind of halfway between the two. This is pretty useful and something that most people might prefer to go with. Alright, I think that's pretty much it for the spine. Oh, right. The other thing we should talk about is the options in here as well. So we talked about the IK/FK switch and the auto volume. So if you're using stretch, that'll follow parent orient. And then the next thing we have is the curvature. So because this has the tune arm enabled, if I were to point the hand this way, have the arm bent, and these work in IK or FK. And I'm going to go into the switch control. The reason why it's on this control is because whether you're in IK or FK, these attributes are agnostic to which mode. But if I turn on the elbow curve, this is how much the curve control, which you can't see right now. I'll turn that on in a sec. But if we turn on the curve itself, so you can see how these controls sort of bend a little bit. So if I rotate this back, you can see how they kind of round out. And then here I can go in and adjust the elbow curve. And if I do that, it'll sort of round things out a bit. And to see what's going on here a little bit better, I'm going to turn on some of these controls. So I have the macro controls. We can sort of see what this does when I adjust the elbow curve. So the elbow kind of bends, like will always point wherever the elbow is supposed to bend. And if I'm in FK mode, I'll switch to FK here. You can see as I rotate the FK, wrong one, this guy. As I rotate this control goes fully width unless I turn down or turn up the elbow curve, and then it'll follow kind of halfway in between. I get sort of a rounding happening. Alright, and so with these controls, these are the macro controls. I can go in and change the stretchiness and the bendiness of them. So pretty powerful stuff. And then next is the arm micro controls. So same as with the spine, if I move these around, I also have the ability to affect each joint individually, rotate, scale, however you want to affect. And then lastly we have the arm twist. So as you twist the wrist, for example, you'll get auto twisting, but then you can have a little bit more control. You have this twist control, so you go and add more or less twist. Same with the shoulder. So as the shoulder rotates, you get twisting along there. So it spreads, so you get a nicer deformation. But again, you can go in here and control that twist as well. So next up is the leg options. So I'm going to go in here and give this a name. So I'm going to call these. I'm going to create two sets of legs just to show the difference between the one knee and the two knee. So I'm going to go front leg and then choose the number of joints. I won't add any roll joints, and I'm only going to do one knee joint here. And I'll do a pair, and I'm going to select where I want these to come off of, which will be my root, and I'm going to choose create. Okay, so I can move these where I want them to be. Maybe I'll move these ones a bit more forward. And then I'll add another set of legs coming out the back. So these are the knees. I can go ahead and point those, position the hips where I want them to be. And then in here we have a bit more than what are in the arms. So we have this, the front leg ground. So this is kind of where you want your ground plane to sit. And then you have these joints here, which represent the ball, the toe, the ankle. And then there's these little crosses here, which are for the tilting and like the different pivot points. So you want to stick one on the heel. So wherever the geometry of your character is, that should go at the very back of the geometry where the heel would lift. And then on the sides of the foot, wherever the edge of that geometry is, these are your left tilt and right tilt, and that's on both feet. And you can spread the legs out. And when you're positioning the center one here, this tells you, indicates the direction of bend. So if you wanted him to be more bow-legged, then you'd point that out, but typically you would have this more pointed, straight forward. So I'm just going to do a mirror all. There we go. Alright, and then the next option, so I'm going to do hind leg. And I'm going to select this again, And I'm going to choose, sure, I'll add roll joints this time. I'm going to go 2 knee joints, and I'll add some roll joints there as well. And maybe for the legs, I'll turn off the tune legs because we showed it in the arms. And I'm going to go create, and I'm just going to back these up. So it's somewhat similar to the legs here, except the main difference is, so we have the hips as before, we have the knees as before, and all this stuff at the bottom for the feet. But one thing that's different is we have this second knee joint. So if you were to create something that was a bit more like a dog leg or something, you might have something like this, and then you can position this to fit. And again, I'll mirror all these, and there we go. Alright, so in the edit modules, same sort of thing, I can load in and adjust if I want to change the roll joints, however many I want. If I want to maintain that this has 2 knees, I would leave that on. But I'll leave everything as is, and I'm going to go ahead and generate the rig again. So we'll go generate rig. Alright, so again, I won't choose an arm. Alright, so we have quite a bit going on here, and I'll just sort of go through the front legs really quick. So this is very similar to the arm in that we have the ability to stretch, and we have the knee lock and the scale. So the scale, how that works again is, you know, if you adjust this, you can overshoot or squish the leg. So normally, like if you bend the leg like this, it stops scaling so that it can bend. But if you want to not have it bend at all, you can shrink the scale down as you're going, so it never actually, you have to go a lot smaller before it bends again. The other stuff we have is the tilts. So let me put the foot back down here on the ground. And so we have the, well, not just tilt, but all these other things. So we have tilt, so we can tilt from left to right. Again, this is built on where you put those little crosses, these crosshairs. We have the ball up and down, so we can lift the ball of the foot up. We have the toe up down, so we can tap the toe if we need. Ball swivel, so pivot around the ball. And heel ball, so this does a rocking from heel to ball. And then the rest of the settings is, what does this follow? Does it follow the root? If so, then as we move this one, you can see that that foot follows the root. I can turn that off. And just to go in really quick here again, so in the switch control we have how much it will follow the parent, auto volume, and then we have the IK-FK switching as well. So I can switch this from IK to FK and move that around and animate an FK if I need to. Alright, so that's the front legs. So I'll stick this one out here somewhere. And then the hind legs are a little bit different. So we have that extra control. So the controls all here are the same. And I can still do the stretch. So it'll actually stretch out the leg. And same thing with like the knee lock. Still have that happening. But the one thing that's different is we have this extra control here in the leg, and this is the lower leg control. So as you're having the character walk, usually this part of the foot's a little bit more rigid, but we can still animate it. So by default, you can see it's sort of bending, and this is just the auto orient. So if I turn this off, it'll stay completely rigid, and then it won't sort of aim towards the hip at all. Whereas if I turn it on all the way, it will aim more and kind of bend towards the hip, which is up here. And that's about it for that one. Then we have the lower scale, so I can actually adjust how much scaling happens from this portion of the leg. And so I can do that in conjunction with the rest of the scale of the leg. So pretty flexible stuff, a lot of control for animators, and that's pretty much the legs. Alright, so next up we're going to cover the FK controls and proxies. So I'm going to scroll down my list a little bit to get to the FK chain, and I'm going to start with creating some fingers. So when you create an arm, you don't get any fingers or hands, because maybe it's you have a character who has a hook for a hand or something, and you don't need this, so it's not assumed that you need anything attached to the arm. So we're going to create some fingers. So I'm just going to call this finger, and it's going to number them based on how many chains and joints per chain. So the chains is the number of FK chains, or in this case it'll be the number of fingers, and then the joints per chain is set to 4, so I'm going to use 4 and 4. So these will be just the fingers, not including the thumb, and then I'll select the wrist, and I'll leave this as the default X outward, and I'm going to turn off enable IK. This can be powerful, but it's also one of the things that can really weigh your rig down and make it much slower because of all the calculations it has to do for all these extra nodes. So unless you need it, I recommend leaving it off. And I'm going to go ahead and create the FK chain, and I'll make it a bit smaller here. And then just sort of fit these to your character as you would. And pinky is going to be quite a bit smaller. So you might end up with something like this, and maybe I'll just give them a bit of curl. So they act as FK joints would. And I can maybe point them all down a little bit. There we go, something like that. And then I'm going to go in and just mirror all these. So is it to mirror left to right? That gets those. And then I'll add the thumb as well. So I'll just go in here. And so for this one I only want one chain, and I'll call this thumb. And maybe rather than outward, I'll have this go positive Z. So it's kind of pointing more or less in the direction I want. And now I can go in and move this, scale the parent node. Again, the parent is just for moving the whole thing around. Anything where you don't have a circle in it means you're not going to get a joint there. So this is just a way of manipulating the entire group of proxies in that module. Okay, so this is going to be my thumb, and I'll mirror left to right again. And maybe I'll twist it a bit. There we go. So you can adjust these however you need to fit your character. And I'm also going to add one, we'll create a tail. So I'm going to call this tail, and this time I'm not going to mirror it. And I just want a chain of 1, and maybe I'll do like 12 joints in this chain. So I'll create this off of the root joint, and I'll do -Z. It doesn't really matter which one of these you choose because you can always just rotate it around, but this just saves you a bit of effort. And there we go. So I can go in and if I want this tail to be a bit bigger, I can do that. Move these into place, and let's say your character has a bit of bend in the tail to begin with, so I can go in and rotate some of these, and rotate some of these back maybe. Okay, so there's your character's tail, and should be good to go. So now, because I had this turned off for all of these, I want to go in and turn it back on for maybe this joint chain here for the tail. So I'm going to go to the edit modules, find the edit FK chains, load that in, and then I could type it in as well. And so I'll just leave the settings as it was, so 1 and 12. And then I'm leaving this on now, so this will turn it back on. So you can see that if you select any of the parents of these, you have this IK enabled, and here it's off. Same with these ones here, but if I go in here and keep this selected and I do apply the edits, it'll turn it on now. And so if I wanted, I could increase or decrease the number as well, and the same with the chains, so I could say 20, And if I apply the edits now, they all come branching off of that one at the end. And so once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and generate the rig. Call it whatever you want to. And once again, I'm not going to create a single hierarchy. Alright, so here we go. So this is everything that we need to use for the FK stuff. Now the controls will be, it's a best guess on the size of the controls. You can always go into here and scale the controls. So I can say 0.5 and mirror the scale as well. And so that way it affects both sides. And so maybe that's a bit better. And these ones here may be a bit too small. So I'm going to go in and grab all these guys. And I can make them bigger. Or maybe I'll just shrink my joint size. Now, sure, let's make these bigger. So I'll go scale 2. There we go. Alright. And these ones, maybe I'll go 0.5 as well. Just make these a bit smaller. Okay. And there we go. So let's look at the fingers first. I'm going to just set it so I can't select my joints here. Just template them. In here we can go in and grab all these and rotate them. So pretty straightforward for FK. You can rotate, you can move them, you can scale them if you want, and then there are some additional settings as well. So if we look at, so I have these fingers here. Actually, I'm going to change my joint size. I'll make these like 0.2, just there. There we go. A little easier to see here. Okay, so if I were to like rotate out the pinky, for example, there's a master control for each set of FK chains. So in here there's these auto spread settings, so I can auto spread the rotation, and what this will do is as this rotates, the fingers automatically spread out, and same if I grab this one here, so I can spread them out. And there's also an option for position. So right now if I were to go and grab one of these and move it, you can see it only affects that one. If I turn this on, now if I move this, it'll kind of move along with it. And then there's also the parent orient. So if I were to go and grab the wrist control, you can see these all move with the wrist. And if for some reason I wanted to go and turn this off, now when I rotate this, it's not going to do anything to the rotation. They still follow, but they maintain their orientation, which might be more useful for the tail, like if you're having the character twist. You could go in and affect that. Now, any module you have attached to the root, you get this extra setting for whether it's attached to the root or the root parent or root secondary. So right now it's attached to the root, so if I rotate the root, it goes with it, but I may want to attach it to the root secondary here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to grab this master control and switch this to excuse me, the root secondary. So now if I rotate, the tail goes with the legs, and you get that sort of movement. Now, because of this one, there's extra settings here for the IK. Now that was not enabled on these ones, so there's no option here, but if you have the IK enabled, you have this option to turn on blended additive, or have it just be take over. So I'm going to increase the spine influence, and here's all the spine controls. So these are actually really large too. So I'm going to grab all these and scale these down. Maybe one more time. There we go. So these are the spline controls, and each one of these is sort of independent of each other, and they affect on a spline. So you can see that the tail actually flows along the spline here, and it's sort of a hybrid IK FK thing going on here. So I'm going to crank this all the way to 1. So now wherever these go, it's going to follow, and for each one of these they have a follow amount. So let's say I wanted to move this around but not have the ones below it be affected. So I could grab this one and turn off the follow amount. And then so now as this moves around, those ones try to stay locked to where they are. And so each one of these controls has that setting. So if you wanted to, and you want to have like all these work independently of each other, you could grab all of them and turn off the follow amount. And so now each one does its own thing independent of the others. Where this might be useful is if you have in your setting here, you have the blended additive. So if you're doing an additive, what you can do is rotate this, and then it's additive of that. So by having the additive on, you can see it adds that to it. So you could like animate these doing something different than these controls. So you could use this to maybe try like get something more like a tentacle animation happening, or you can just use it straight out with that one with just the IK. So blended additive means it's like adding both effects. If it's blended, it just does kind of one or the other, or it can do something in between. Alright, so the next one I'm going to go over is the head. So usually you need a neck for a head, so I'm just going to create one more spline here really quick. So I'm just going to call this neck, and maybe there'll be 2 joints. And don't need to mirror it. Sure, there we go. So creating. And I'll just move these down a bit, so there we go. So we have like 2 intermediate joints and then one that the head will attach to. If you want, say, one less, I could go in here, load that. Maybe I'll make this one instead. There we go. But I'll leave it at 2. Okay, so now we're ready for the head. So we're going to select the end of the neck. And the head is very simple. It doesn't really have much to it. You could basically simulate more or less the same thing with just FK chains, but we'll create the specific one for the head. And I'm going to include a jaw, and I'm going to hit create head. So I didn't want to mirror the head because I didn't want 2 heads, but you could do that. Now when you're adding those mirrored ones, it'll attach both of them to the same one unless that one is also mirrored, and then sort of like how the hands are, we get one on each side. Alright, so I have this head here, and this is the jaw, so I can go and position that where I want it to be, and then we have the jaw end, which is, it's not something you normally skin to, same with the head end joint, but what these do is give you an attachment point if you want to attach anything to that. Now you'll notice that there's no actual joint for the head itself, like right at the base of the head. That would be, you would just use the top of the neck for that, because this is all you get. So you get the head top, the jaw end, and the jaw. And it's really no extra settings in there at all. Okay, so I'm going to go in, and the only thing you can edit in this one is just whether you want there to be a jaw, so you can toggle the jaw on and off. So if I grab this and load it and toggle it, I'll just toggle the jaw on and off. And that's pretty much it. We'll generate it anyways. It'll be super simple. And once again, I'm not going to generate the single chain hierarchy. Alright, so if we look at the head here, there's not too much going on, but I have the neck top, so this more or less moves the head around. And then you see there's just like a top joint here for the top of the head. Turn on my joints again. And then we just have like the jaw control. So really nothing special. Go ahead and move the jaw up and down, and you can move it around. What is in here though is their parent orient. So like most of these controls, if you were to tilt the character over, you can see the head goes with it. If you wanted, you could turn this off on just the head, and then so only those joints would move. Now the neck doesn't actually change. This is something you probably wouldn't use very often, but if you're doing something more robotic, you may want to be able to have the head pivot on its own. Generally though, you probably wouldn't mess with that much because the neck itself has that top orient, so that the neck would bend with it. But if you didn't want the neck to be affected, like keep the neck bent but not have the head tilt, you could do it that way. So again, it's just an option there. Whether you use it much or not is kind of up to you. So the second last one we have are the look-ats. So if you scroll down here, we have look-at joints. Now this is for things like eyes typically, and so I'll give this a name so I can say eye. And similar to the FK chains, you can choose a direction where you want these to point. Now for humans and more predators, probably be pointing forward. For fish and other animals, that may be pointed outward likely. And then you can set the number of joints, and this is how many joints per side. Again, you have the mirror, so typically you would mirror eyes. For something like the head, there is no joint at the base of the head, so you could attach them to the top of the neck, but I usually attach it to the top joint of the head here. That's just because of the ability to have the whole module of the head orient differently. So I'm going to choose the head top, and again you can attach these to anything. So we'll go with this one, and one is good, and I'll go create. And then same as before, you can move the parent node, and then you have the eye node itself to wherever that would sit. So you can move one or the other. If you have like a group of eyes, then this is more useful, having the parent. And as before, I'll just mirror everything. And I'll go ahead and generate the rig. Okay, so here's my completed rig, and I can go in here and see what we have here for the eyes. I have the look at control, so this will move all of the eyes, and the eye joints will actually look at. So maybe just for now we'll turn on the local rotation axis so we can actually see what the eyes are doing here. So as I move this around, you can see that the eyes point towards it on the x-axis. And we can go in and move each eye individually. So I want to have one eye move separate from the other. If I want to have them like focusing closer in on a point or something, you have the ability to do that, and they're still relative to this. Now in here, this works in local space or not. So if I were to rotate the head around, you can see that the eyes follow along with the neck. But if you wanted to keep the eyes fixed on a certain point, I can set local space to 0. And let's say I wanted them to be looking off somewhere over here. So now if the head or the neck were to rotate, you can see that the eyes stay looking at that area. And then I can go and turn it back on and off, and this is keyable. Alright, so the very last option we have is the auxiliary joints. So these are just simple attachments. Let's say you want to have like armor attached to a shoulder, or you just want to have some extra joints floating around for doing muscle deformation or whatever. They're super simple. They're just single joints, and you can build them up. So let's say this guy was going to be wearing a pseudo armor or padding on his shoulders. So I'm just going to select one of the shoulders, and I'll give this a name. So let's call this shoulder pad or something. And then I can again choose if I want to mirror it. So if I do that, then I get one on each side. And I can go in and rotate this to whoever I want this to be, and can always do the mirror left to right. And you can add these on to anything you like. So you can add them on to the elbows. You can add them on to each other. So I could do shoulder pad 2, and then now I have even more attached. And let's say like I just wanted one off the spine. So in this case, I might say like chest protector or something. And then choose that one maybe and create it, and now that one is not mirrored, so I just get one. And I'll go ahead and generate the rig here. Alright, and so these are the controls for the auxiliaries. So there's not much there. They're super simple, but if I go and I rotate, you can see they move with, and I can go in and turn off how much they move with the parent, so they can sort of stay locked to that location if you wanted it to. Probably not the most ideal, but if you ever needed to have an attachment, like something stick to a wall when the character moves, you could easily do that. The size of the controls by default is based on the size of the proxy, so if you made your proxies bigger, these would be larger. The rename selected module is pretty straightforward. All you do is you select any proxy from the module you want to rename. So let's say I have the arm here, so this one was called arm. So we have the RRM underscore L underscore arm underscore elbow, and then we have the wrist and the shoulder, all with that same naming convention. So what this will do is just change the arm portion. So I'm going to go give it a new name. So rather than arm, let's say I wanted this to be arm 2 or something like that. And then if I go rename, we'll go through everything and then rename everything. So all the nodes are now called arm 2. Alright, so one thing you can do is you can clone modules. So let's say I wanted to have another set of arms coming out of this guy. So I can choose a new name. So this one's called arm, so I'm going to call this arm 2. Or yeah, whatever I want to call it. And then there's the option to clone all the branches or just the one that I have. So if I turn this off, it would only clone the arm. But if I want to clone all the FK chains here, like the fingers and the thumb that I've created, I can tell it to include branches. Again, I can say clone selected module. Now, if you have include branches turned on, you'll get a UI that pops up asking you to rename all the children. So shoulder pad, so I can call this one shoulder pad 2, finger 2, and thumb 2. And then I will hit OK. And so now I got another set of arms coming out of here, and I can go in and I can move these over to where I want, and then maybe make them a bit bigger. And I'll just actually maybe what would be better is maybe I want to attach these to somewhere in the spine, and maybe these will be smaller arms. So just shrink these down a little bit. I'll just set the scale back at 1 actually. I'll be fine. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll move this arm up a bit and this one in a bit. And I'll just mirror everything from left to right. So as you're building your rig, you may want to be able to attach your modules to somewhere new. So right now, these extra arms that I have built here will be generated off of the spine. So wherever the spine moves, they're going to go with it. So what I may want to have is maybe I want these arms to be attached to the spine too. So all I do is I go in here and I load in my new attachment model. So I have the proxy selected. And then I grab these, or just grab one of these here, and I say attach selected modules to new module. And so now when I generate my rig, they're going to be attached to this one here instead. As you're working, chances are you may add something that you don't want. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this whole second arm that I built. All I have to do is select any proxy on it, and what it will do is it will delete this module, this module and all its proxies, and any branching modules off of it. So you can see if I hit delete selected modules and branches, it gets rid of all of that. Now, if let's say you wanted to keep something attached to something else, like you wanted to keep the this one here, but so when you deleted this, you wanted to preserve this one. What you can do is go back to this attach selected module to somewhere new. So I could load in this one and then grab this guy and attach it there. And now if I go in and delete these, now that one stays there. So as you're posing your rig, you may want to apply the change from one side to the other. So let's say I'm moving this arm into a better position and I want the elbow to be bent more. What I can do is then mirror, and I can choose how I want to mirror. So I can do right to left or just reset whatever I'm working with, and I can do left to right. And then I can specify is it to the selected one, just this one proxy, is it the entire module, so this would be the entire arm in this case, the branch, which means it and all of its children, or I can do everything. So if I were to just want to mirror everything from one side to the other, like let's say I made a bunch of changes and I wanted to have those reflect across my entire rig. So now I can just do all left to right, and that will mirror everything. Now you don't have to keep it mirrored, so if you want to make any changes, like let's say you have one arm that was longer than the other, you don't have to mirror that, but let's say you wanted to have his hands be bigger. So what you could do is just say, or actually maybe I'll just scale up these guys like this instead. So he's going to have bigger fingers. Rather than doing all, I'll just do selected and do left to right, and now both hands will be bigger, but you can see it maintained the position of this. If I wanted to have everything in the the arm down be affected, and let's say the legs were in different locations, but I didn't want to affect that, but wanted to do everything from the arm down, that's where you'd use branch. So I can do left to right and then have the whole branch go. And that's pretty much it. You can reset, so if I want to go in and put all these back to their defaults, I can just hit reset, and then I'll put all their translate, rotate, scales back to their defaults. As you're working, you may decide that you want to move some things around without having other parts move. So for example, let's say I wanted to move the spine down a bit, but you can see it affects everything else. So what I can do is select, say for example, the parent nodes of both sides here, and just say, tell those to pin. And what happens now is if I move what they're attached to around, they stay where they are. They don't move. And then let's say I want to have the spine a little bit lower, like here. I could go back in and unpin them, and now they'll move with the spine again. So you could do this with any module. It affects the entire module. Same with the auxiliaries, so I can pin that, and now if this moves, you can see it changes. And to know if it's pinned or not, the color of the line turns red, the connection line, to indicate that it's pinned. And then if you hit it again to unpin, now it'll move, and now it's back to being blue. So at times you may end up with parts of your rig that are quite similar. So for example, here I have these two arms. Now let's say for example there was a change that came in with the models, and the arms were identically altered, so maybe the arms were more straight up and down, and everything was kind of moved where you want it to go, sort of like this. Now you're still able to go left to right. However, these other arms are still bent down, and you may want to save your time. If you had to make all these edits to everything, you can actually transfer. So what I can do is say transfer from module. So I select the one I want to transfer from, and the one I want to transfer to, and then click this button. And there we go. So it'll try to match as best it can. And then I can do the same thing on the other side, or I can just mirror again. So let's go like this and this, and transfer. It'll do the entire module. Now if I wanted to do everything, I could have said branch, so it would have got the fingers too, but this way you can get them looking more or less exactly the same. Alright, so the last couple options we have here are the save transform, load transform, and then the save setup and load setup. So these are a little bit different. What the transform does is it saves the positions of each of the proxies, which can then be loaded onto a different proxy rig. So say for example I want to save these positions and load them onto a character that maybe didn't have the auxiliaries and the double arms. So let's do that first. I'm going to go save transforms, and it saves it with a certain suffix or file name, so that way you know which one's which. So I'm going to call this RM, and I'll call this transform PROXIES 01. Alright, and I'm just going to create a new scene, and I'm going to use a biped template. And then from here I can load on the transforms from that other file that I just saved out. And so what this will do is it will try its best to match. Now if the names are different, then it's not going to work so well. So it did the arms, it did the spine, did the neck and stuff, but it didn't really do the legs just because of names being different. So it'll sometimes get it. So generally if they're fairly similar, you can just load them back and forth. I'm going to go back and reopen my other file. And I'll show you what the save setup does. So I have this again. Yeah, the reason why I didn't save the other one was because I called this one front leg and the other one was called leg. So that's what I could do, is rename this one to be leg and then save it out and load it, and it would actually work all right. But I'm going to do a save setup instead. So I'm going to go save setup, and I'll just replace this one that I already have. So give it a name. This has a custom file extension as well, so I'll save that. This way you don't get the two types confused. Alright, so I'm just going to create a new scene now, so rather than creating your own or finding a way to have more of these, this is your way of creating your own templates. So I'm going to create a new scene here, and then I can just load this custom setup that I've built, and now I have that one loading and building, and there we go. So now it's that same setup loaded back in, and now I can generate a new rig. So you could, if you're working in a production, you could save these as backups or whatever you need, and now you're pretty much ready to go. So that is all of the proxy settings. The one that I didn't really go over was changing the colors, but this one's pretty straightforward. You can go in and modify the colors of the proxies, but I kind of recommend not doing that because they're color coded based on these here. So you can see the ribbon splines are all the same color as this. But if you do find you're in a little bit of clutter, like you have these fingers and thumbs that are really close to each other, you could give the thumbs a different color, for example. And it's a little easier to distinguish from the other parts.